Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP. Today we are going to be continuing on our Minmus theme and we are going to be sending Kerbals once again there. But we're going to focus on doing it in a rover. Let's first take a look at our contracts. We don't have too many, but the important one is this research celestial body, which will be over in 35 days. So we're just going to go ahead and time warp it until we can kind of complete that. And we're going to take a look at that in our observatory. And this is from the research body mod, which makes it so you don't know where the celestial bodies are, so you have to learn. And we are now making some progress on our journey with that. So our research state for Jewel is at 10%, as well as it's going to be for Moho. But we're going to want to focus on Moho first. Due to Strategy's progression system, it wants us to visit this planet before we can visit Jewel, unfortunately. So I'm going to stop the research on Jewel to hopefully boost the research on Moho. But I do find out later that we need to take another step entirely to progress. As I look here, I'm going to spend the money to upgrade our research and development because we have a lot of science and we're going to need to push past the barrier that it had. I'm taking a hard look at advanced unmanned tech. I think I'm going to really want this soon. However, I don't necessarily need to deal with probes right now. Specialized command modules I'm definitely going to want because it comes with the Alcor pod. So I go ahead and grab that. I looked through short-term habitation to see what they have, and I'm kind of excited about it because it has these drill-matics, and I'm going to want to create a machine to dig up ore. But ultimately, it's this advanced science tech that we're going to grab because it has the parts necessary for the rover we're going to build today. And the rover we're going to build is from the Lynx mod. Mod will be listed in the mod list in the description below. But by clicking on the Rovers tab here at the bottom, it gets all the different Lynx parts, so you can just kind of, so it's all filtered for you. And just kind of go through there. And we play around with our design and try to figure out what we want. But ultimately, we want to make a science rover. We want to be able to pack a few Kerbals in there, so that's why we added an extra crew capsule. And this is the science lab, and we tack on a science junior there, and we are going to be putting a couple service bays on it, so that way we can include some science. So this little cargo bay right here, we can tuck some science away into. And in the last episode, we spent some points to unlock the larger actuators because they had a folding billet joint aspect, so you can have longer rovers. And I thought that we would make some use out of it. That's one right there I pulled off to the side. But I don't think I'm going to make a super large rover for this first one. In fact, we're just going to keep it as compact as we can, while it still ends up becoming kind of large. But as you see here, it has this kind of thing that can pivot and allow your rovers to extend much longer than would be capable to drive. So we're going to once again put that service bay on the back. We're rounding out to our final design. We're going to throw a couple solar panels and a fuel cell on the top of it to make sure it has enough power to run the science experiment, because the science lab on this acts as the regular science lab does. It's not as big, you cannot hold nearly as much data or science, but you still can put 2 scientist Kerbals aboard and turn research into data and data into science. So let's go ahead and throw every experiment that we have available to us within these little boxes. We only need to grab one because we can easily transfer the science from these experiments into the science lab, and then that will leave the experiments free to run in another biome, because ultimately I want this thing to be able to roam around Minmus into different biomes, bring its crew along, and collect all the science that it can, and while doing so, stored in the science lab and running all the while. So this is very much a long-term habitable craft. There is an IVA to the Lynx parts, and it is compatible with the free IVA, so we are going to be able to walk around inside and see all the things that make up the inside of this rover. But for now, we're just putting everything on action groups and making sure we have full control of this when we go up. So I just wanted to check my science that I had unlocked, because I wanted to get a more accurate view of the parts that I just unlocked, and because I wanted to have a nice back end on this, but a lot of them weren't the ones that I needed, so I ended up going with this fuel container, and I believe we packed it with electricity. We're gonna toss a reaction wheel in here. There is a bit of a reaction wheel in the craft itself. However, I wanted it to have a little more control, a little more oomph in its turnage. I just wanted a bigger reaction wheel for it. I did realize I forgot the onboard camera. We're gonna try to tuck some extra batteries in there as well. So now we're going to put the bay doors, on the number 2 action group. And we're going to need some ladders for this, because it's going to be a little tall, and I don't want to have my Kerbals jumping in order to get aboard. So we're just going to put one on each side. And we're going to also attach them to the experiments just on the front where the material science bay is, because that may need to be reset. At least at the time when I was building this, I thought that it may need to be reset, but because of the fact that this has a science lab attached to it, and just like the science lab before, as long as you have your scientists in it, you can right click on the science lab and restore the experiment. So pretty handy. Honestly, this was my first time building anything with the Lynx rover, doing any kind of missions with the Lynx rover. I typically did the ASAT rover. That was my most advanced ones that I've done so far, but I actually pretty enjoyed it. It was very intuitive. The parts were all cleanly labeled. It was a little bit of a challenge for me to kind of like visualize what I wanted out of the rover, but it was procedurally built enough that I felt like I could do what I wanted with it. It did leave a lot to be desired for integration of other parts. I felt it was a little challenging to get other pieces to kind of integrate the way that I wanted them to, but all in all, it was a pretty good rover. Taking the tracking lights from the mod of the same name, we're going to throw those on this right here on the front and act as bigger headlights. The Lynx rover has head and tail lights already included, and it's pretty self-contained. A lot of what you would want you can kind of build from these parts. In a later episode, we'll build a truck, and that's also pretty cool. But let's focus on this for now. And I don't think I really need to do too much to it. We are going to change out those back ladders for ones that extend past the wheel, because I didn't like the way that it clipped through in our test flight. But beyond that, everything kind of went according to plan. We did flip this around and break off our tracking lights, so we have to be careful about the things that we put on the outside of our craft. The Lynx rover is very sturdy and hardy. It seemed to take our flips and rolls pretty well, but still need to be careful. Now, I'm auto-strutting it here. There's not really much of a need to auto-strut it, because it's all relatively contained itself. We could not do an auto-strut and be perfectly fine. However, we are going to be putting this on top of a rocket with a decoupler as its attachment. And so, given the fact that we're going to want to auto-strut the rocket itself by auto starting this to begin with, then we will be able to just keep continuity with it. Here, I'm going to be hiring some new Kerbals to pilot this, and they will be up here, as you see. We've got Ugard for our scientist. We only were able to hire one scientist, so Bob is going to join her. Loggersby is going to pilot this, and Liz Brett is there as our engineer just in case anything goes awry. So let's go ahead and tuck this all in a fairing. And we're going to turn it gold because I like to use that to signify that there are Kerbals aboard. We're going to take moderate sized tank and a poodle engine. We're going to turn the tank orange, check our staging, and simulate once more. And I would call that a pretty successful test. And we learned everything that we needed. We're gonna add this light here just as kind of a last minute vanity feature, but it's really kind of useless and ends up just being more annoying than anything else. But we leave it on there. Flashing red light. I wanted to attach it to the action group that that had the reaction wheel on it, and then that way I could keep an eye on whether or not the reaction wheel is active or not. But the problem is it doesn't always toggle the correct way, so it quickly becomes out of sync. But we leave it on there for the whole thing. Throw an extra solar panel on there because it can always use with that. And I throw a rover brain from the Bon Voyage mod on there so we can control this remotely. We can kind of pick a destination that we want it to wind up at, and then we'll allow the rover brain to take over. Basically, we just switch to another craft or back to the KSC. Wait enough time, let the craft itself meander the real distance, and then when we come back to it, we'll find ourselves at that location that we chose. So that will help me, because then we can kind of send this rover all around Minmus kind of autonomously. You know, the idea is that the Kerbals themselves are piloting it and everything, and allows us to go do other things, work on other launches, and then we'll come back to the rover and be like, okay, where are you now? What kind of science have you gotten? You know, good usage of our time there. You know, if I were to do just to rove to all the different biomes and everything, that would be either one really long episode or too many episodes focusing on the same goal. So now we're building our launch vehicle, and this is going to be something that we're going to become a little more familiar with. I really like the size of this tank, and I like the shape of the adapters that go up to it. And eventually we'll have a rocket engine to match the massiveness of it. But until then, we're going to use engine plates to hold a bunch of mainsails, because those are our most powerful rocket engines currently. But we're going to put them in a 5-way symmetry, 4-way with one in the center. And that's enough to utilize. We have a thrust to weight ratio of over 1, so we'll be doing quite nicely. Let's go ahead and throw solar panels on to the translunar stage, and we don't need them to retract. We're not going to be bringing them into the atmosphere. In fact, we're not even going to be using them at all once we land our vehicle. Elizabeth, Loggerby, and Yurgard in the craft. Everything is good. So that auto strutting that I mentioned earlier, we didn't do it, and let's go ahead and just take care of that now. And if this rocket doesn't wobble on this next test flight, I believe we shall be ready to go. So let's go ahead and take it out again. Okay. So we're going to check our contracts real fast to see if there's anything worth grabbing. We are going to grab this scan for a suitable base, because we're basically going to be doing that anyways. We may want a different place for our colony than for our mining operations, but that will be in another episode with a satellite that kind of scopes that out itself. It was a good test. I think the rocket will suffice. It did remind me that we should put one of these scanning arms on there, especially since we have advanced enough tech that we can scan for 100% of the science. So we throw the large arm on there, put it on top, and hopefully it won't break off if we end up doing some tumbles. We're going to throw some explosives on the lifting stage with some Separatrons to push it backwards, because the lifting stage is enough to get us towards Minmus, but I don't want the space trash, so let's get rid of it and get ready to launch. And here we are once again on the launch pad on a semi-cloudy day. Perfect for launch. Not really much to say, so let's go ahead and get this thing into the air. We're going to follow it for a little bit, but we're going to skip ahead through much of the monotonous parts of getting to orbit, changing our inclination and whatnot. We're going to kind of just focus on getting ourselves to Minmus and focus more on getting safely down landed on its surface. The auto strutting that we did really did help. As you can see here, even as we pitch over, there's no rocking about of our cargo. This lifting engine is severely overpowered. We have more than enough thrust to weight and fuel to get something even heavier than what we have. And this rover weighs quite a bit. It's not a lightweight thing. And this launch vehicle with the 5 mainsails and that size tank, perfect. Single stage to orbit. And the fairings deploy without a problem. Everything going according to plan. Always nice to see. We extend our solar panels now so we don't forget to do so on our trip. And before long, our orbit has been circularized. We get a nice cash bonus for the heavy weight that we just got to orbit. So if you think the dramatic music was over, just wait. We have so much more to go before we can calm down, take a step further, and really relax and appreciate our surroundings. This crew has such a daunting task ahead of them. It's their first flights into space, first landing on another planet, and they're going to be doing more than any Kerbal has in this series so far. Only Bob is familiar with the perils of space. So we get our periapsis down into low space, nice and tight, keep everything easy for landing, and we're going to time warp our way out and meet up with our periapsis. And the minty green ball comes into view, and we pass by it fairly quickly. Get some weird graphical issues. You see very square-like patches on the surface, but when you get a little closer, it seems to disappear. So it takes very little for us to actually circularize. There's quite a bit of thrust weight on this engine. We did change it from the 4 to the singular. I like the look of that better. But yeah, it takes us no time to bring our apoapsis down, and we're now at a 29 kilometer by 28 kilometer orbit. And we're fairly equatorial, but still inclined. We kind of knew that this was going to happen. We had this happen in our test flight. So we know that we're going to have to add a little anti-normal and really fine-tune our landing. And we're going to want to land somewhere on this little hill right here, right next to our actual colony destination, because we want to get a biome before we get to our resting place, so we can get even more science done. Because after all, that is the aim of this mission. In future missions, we'll have different names. So once again, I bring up the landing info, which will give you the vertical and horizontal speed, as well as our time to impact and our suicide and burn countdown. You also have a much larger view of our altitude, so you see how high above the surface we are, and then our surface speed. It's orbit now, but it will change to surface speed shortly. So you can keep an eye on the numbers that I keep an eye on as I come down to land, but not necessarily. You don't have to. You can watch the craft as well. There we go, now in surface mode. If this is something that's helpful for you, please let me know, because I think it's been helpful for me, just doing the voiceovers and talking to y'all about what's going on, being able to see a little more clearly the numbers we're looking at. Like, as you see now, we're about 7 seconds out from our suicide burn countdown. We have our trajectory on, and our time to impact is in 43 seconds, so that strikes me as odd at first, but when I go to full throttle and see that I'm barely killing my surface speed, I realize that my throttle is still limited, and I need to go ahead and take the thrust limiter off that. But that changes my suicide burn countdown to 20 seconds, so we can kill our throttle for a second and let that marker come up. Going at 142 meters per second and rising, and 800 meters above the surface and dropping. 2 seconds suicide burn countdown, 1 second, and at 0.6 seconds I fire, which will give me a little extra room before impact. In our test flight, we hit it at almost 0.01, and not as good as our test flight, but still quite a flawless landing here. Pretty excited with how safely our Kerbals touched down. I did forget to throw on the brakes, so we get a little bit of a bonk there, but luckily nothing exploded, nothing happened to any of our parts or any of our Kerbals, so that is good to know. Let's go ahead and throw on our brakes here, count our lucky stars, and figure out what we want to do with these Kerbals next. Because as you notice, there's still plenty of time left in the episode. This episode wasn't just about landing these Kerbals here. We want them to reach their final destination at the Minmus's Greater Flats. But first, they're going to do some science here in Minmus's Lowlands. We had gathered some of the science before. As you can see, we'll get nothing for recovery and transmission. But on a lot of these things, we can process that in the lab and turn that data into more science. Let's take a quick look at our contracts. We're going to need to return the mystery goo in order to complete that one, but because this craft has a communications dish on it, we were able to complete the contract to create a satellite network for Minmus. This in addition to the polar satellite that we already had. So let's go ahead and take control of Urgard. Say hello to Bob, kind of look around in the IVA. As I mentioned before, this IVA that's compatible with free IVA is just phenomenal for Rover. This is the crew cabin. It holds 2 Kerbals. You can sit in those seats. Up here is the front with that DEMAS screen control. I believe that is the mod. And as we come out here, we have a nice little ladder to come to. And my one of my all-time favorites is the tracking lights that follows us around, gives us light wherever we need in distance of the craft. But anyways, Urgard has the pleasure and opportunity and go ahead to plant a flag as their landing zone. This is going to be a spot that we will end up visiting later because of that space debris on there. So we'll want to come back to that at some point. But for now, it is time for her to take a surface sample, gather her belongings, and head back in to the rover. A little TV over there on the computer. Very nice touches on these IVAs. Sit back in her seat, and then they're gonna go get ready to head down the hill for the landing zone. This was a great landing. Everything went as according to plan as possible. Like I mentioned before, our touchdown and our test flight was a little more perfect than this, but I couldn't have asked for a better landing. Because not only did we utilize our fuel or our suicide burn countdown to its efficiency, but we're actually fairly close to our goal. And because we didn't land at the top of the hill up over there, as actually we had landed a little higher in altitude, so we had a much more dramatic slope in our test flight. But this slope will actually be pretty good because it's gonna be a little difficult to control this craft at high speeds, and we want to make sure that we don't build up too much speed that we break ourselves. Maybe this is the place that we landed for a test flight, because I actually recognize that olivine formation that we're gonna come up to as we crest over the hill. Maybe we just came at it from a different angle, but nonetheless, this is something that we didn't test in our test flight that we are going to try to do, and that is utilize that scanning arm that we threw on at the very last minute, because this is exactly what we would need to use it for. So we're only going about 6.8 meters per second towards it. There's no need to really go any faster because we are going to have to cancel out all of our momentum once we get there, and we're only building up momentum from here because we're going downhill. So we're just going to take this nice and slowly. This was going to be a very interesting rover to drive in first person, but since this is our first foray with the rover out, we're going to just keep doing it in third person. But either in this series or eventually in KXP POV, we are going to have some fun with this rover, I think. Alright, throw on our brakes and try to stop as best as we can. Thankfully the rock is solid, so it goes ahead and stops us, and thankfully as well it didn't stop us so close to it that our science arm couldn't do its thing. So this scanning arm is from the Breaking Ground DLC, as well as this rock formation, I believe, in and of itself. So it's going to just go ahead and do its science there, little experiments in the rock, and we can get 300 science for transmitting it, but we can also process it in the lab. In hindsight, I probably should have transmitted it for the 300 science and then just run the experiment again and put that in the lab. So unfortunately we do not do that. However, we do utilize the science that we put into the lab itself. So in the end, it did end up paying for itself by giving us more science than the 300. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and break away from this formation and just very carefully head back down the hill. We have our target up there ahead of us, a few kilometers. Like I mentioned before, we landed very close to our goal, so I was very excited about that. Precision landing, I really enjoy a good precision landing, and when I can land exactly where I want or relatively close to where I want, it's a great feeling. Just listening to our chatter and cruising down. Nice calm music. No more intense music for this episode. We got through the thick of things, and we're ready to calm down and enjoy our little stroll on Minmus. We do, however, need to utilize that reaction wheel and with the power of the Q and E keys, we are able to regain control. So now we're going about 10.2 meters per second. I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward the footage so we get there a little bit faster than we did in real life. And before long, a 10-minute journey for me becomes a 30-second one for you, and we are at our destination. Do throw on our brakes a little later than we wanted. I wanted to be a little closer to the flag, but nonetheless, this is a good spot. We're going to be leaving our rover here for now. We're going to have other crafts rendezvous at this location in the following episodes. But now that we are at the Greater Flats, let's go ahead and run our experiments again. As you see, we don't get a lot of science for it, but the science lab is able to process almost all of it, and we'll turn it into much more science than we would have gotten if we had just transmitted it, or even if we had brought it home. So we're going to go ahead and let it do that. We're going to get our Kerbal out on EVA to grab a surface sample. Let's go ahead and get Urgard Kerman. And for some reason, the opposite side door freaked out a little bit when she got aboard, or got off, and sent her flying. We quickly try to cycle through all the different pieces, and we get back to her. Luckily, she's not going so fast that she's in danger of exploding, so when she comes to a landing, it's very thankful to see her still alive. We're going to go ahead and walk her back, jump her back, stumble her way back, and eventually get back onto the ladder, get into the ship. We're going to also grab a surface sample. We're going to do that off camera because things are starting to get long enough as is. So let's go ahead and get her aboard and headed back into the research lab so she can start the research. There's 378 data points in there. We can only do 100 science at a time, so we can't let it go for as long as a normal science lab can. However, we can still, it still functions just the way that a normal lab would. So all that science is going to be good. I did try to find the best way to keep from a flashing light sequence, but as we time warp, there is very hard not to have a flashing light. So I'm just going to focus on this so you can see the data points being turned into science. There still is a little bit of flashing, I apologize, but as you're hearing this, you can just keep your focus away and I'll let you know when to look back. But we have now created 99.75 science. You can look again. So all we need to do now is transmit that via this satellite dish on top. So as we say, if we just click it, transmit, it says there's no communications aboard. So we go change it to the Minmus, point it towards Minmus, but that doesn't help, doesn't transmit. So let's go ahead and select the specific Minmus satellite that is in orbit to bounce it off as a relay, but that doesn't work either. And we're in view of Kerbin, so we could theoretically connect to one of those satellites and get a signal because our comms dish is far enough. So we go ahead and link up to Kerbin, point it towards Kerbin, and try to send it. But that is exactly what we need. And so now it is sending forth the science, uploading the data, and at the end of it, we shall have 100 extra science points to spend on all sorts of stuff. So we're now at 682. And there's plenty of more data in this to run, and we can do sets of 100 science over and over and over again until we exhaust all the data from this. But then we could also take it and put it in a different biome, collect different experiments, have it rove all around Minmus, storing up its data and giving us science as we need. But that is the end of today's episode because I'm going to be doing a lot of that stuff off camera, the science gains, the fast forwarding through time to do the research. So that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider subscribing, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.